My name is Thelma Rayburn. I'm 78 years old, and I've never missed a Christmas with my family. Until this one. The text came through while I was stirring the cranberry sauce in my tiny kitchen. I still remember the ding, the sharp buzz that echoed in my bones. It was from my daughter, Natalie. It read,
Hey, Mom.
"We decided it's better if you skip Christmas this year. Don't take it the wrong way, but you kinda embarrass us. It's just gonna be our immediate family. Hope you understand." I read it 3 times before I let the spoon fall out of my hand and hit the floor. I had already wrapped all their gifts. Natalie's cashmere sweater, her husband Ken's golf club cover, little Ellie's art kit, Jackson's remote control truck. They were stacked neatly under the fake fireplace I had decorated with dollar store lights and too much love. And just like that, I was uninvited. I stood in the middle of my quiet apartment. No ticking clock, no fireplace, no laughter of grandkids running wild, and I stared at the blinking text. Embarrass them? Was it my cardigan sweaters? My bad knees? The way I told stories too slow? Or was it the part where I raised her alone while her father skipped town? I sank into the chair. No tears. Just silence. That night, the gifts stayed wrapped. But I didn't. I stayed up writing a list of names, not family, but people I knew had no one. Martha in 2B, who lived on canned peas. Mr. Harold from the senior center, whose son never called. The clerk at Dollar Max, who always smiled but had holes in his gloves. By morning, I had a new plan. I packed the gifts in plain bags, added cards with handwritten notes, and carried them into town on the city bus, dressed in my best red scarf. I gave Ellie's art kit to a little girl in a shelter. The truck went to a boy at the church food pantry. The sweater? To a woman trembling outside a train station. Every gift they thought I'd saved for them went to someone who still saw me, still smiled at me, still made room for me. And when I dropped the last package off, I sat on a bench, looked up at the gray December sky, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Natalie." But I wasn't done yet. Because what they didn't know was that I had saved one more surprise. And it wasn't wrapped in paper. It was written in ink, sitting in a safe deposit box. It was the will. And they were about to find out who really paid for all those holidays. Have you ever been left out by your own family, especially during the holidays? Don't scroll. This is just the beginning of Thelma's story. You won't believe what she does next. If this broke your heart or made you angry, hit that like button right now. Comment Thelma deserves better if you're rooting for her comeback. And don't forget to subscribe, because in next chapter, everything starts to unravel and Thelma begins to take back her power. Before they saw me as an embarrassment, I was the reason they had anything at all. Natalie wasn't always this cold. Once upon a time, she was my shadow, my baby girl with curly brown hair and a laugh that could melt winter. I raised her in a small farmhouse in rural Oklahoma, on a teacher's salary and prayer. Her father left when she was 4, leaving me with nothing but unpaid bills and a promise he never kept. I worked double shifts, sold baked goods on weekends, and somehow still made it to every school recital. I didn't have much, but Natalie had everything I could give. She was my world. And when she got a scholarship to college in Kansas, I cried proud tears watching her board that bus. Then she met Ken. From the moment I saw his too white smile and firm handshake, something in me tightened. He came from money, old money, the kind that doesn't understand hard work. The kind that makes subtle jabs about country manners and simple folks. Still, I kept my smile. I wanted to be welcome. Natalie married him within a year, and suddenly, the phone calls slowed. The visits became rare. I always told myself they were just busy, careers, babies, life. But deep down, I felt the gap growing. After I retired, I sold the farmhouse and moved to a small apartment close to them. I didn't want much, just time with my grandkids. I offered to help with daycare, bought groceries when they were tight, and gave Natalie my rainy day savings when Ken's business hit a rough patch. They took it all with thanks. For a while. But something changed 2 years ago. Natalie stopped letting the kids stay over. Ken always had meetings. I stopped being invited to birthdays. At Thanksgiving, I noticed they sat me at the far end of the table, next to the back door. I still brought pumpkin pie. This past summer, They forgot my birthday. I reminded myself it wasn't personal until that Christmas text made it personal. And yet I didn't rage. I didn't beg. I didn't cry in front of anyone. I quietly gave away the gifts they rejected. But what they didn't realize was I had kept records. Every dollar lent, every bill paid, every signed note from Ken's company when he used my name to secure that short-term loan 2 years ago. I wasn't just a grandma with a kind heart. I was a retired schoolteacher with a ledger. And I wasn't done writing in it. Have you ever watched someone change when they thought you had nothing left to give? If this story made you feel something, like it, comment, and share it with someone who still believes in dignity. Subscribe for more powerful stories where quiet women rise with quiet strength. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I just started preparing. In silence. That's the thing about getting older. People think you're harmless. That your silence means surrender. But silence is where storms gather. After Christmas, I went to the credit union where I had banked for 40 years. The same one where I once opened Natalie's first savings account. I sat across from a young man named Jonah and asked to review the shared account Ken had used for his business draw. I was still a legal co-signer. It was my name, my trust, that helped him get approval. He called it just a formality back then. I called it foolish love. Jonah blinked when I asked him to freeze it. Ma'am, are you sure? That account, it's got over $90,000 moving through monthly. I nodded. Exactly why it needs to stop. I signed the papers with a steady hand. By the end of the day, Ken's business cards were useless. Meanwhile, I gathered more than paperwork. I found copies of the promissory note from when I bailed him out during the pandemic. I found old texts, emails, receipts, all showing that their lifestyle was built on my sacrifices. But I didn't want revenge. Not the angry kind. I wanted a reckoning. Natalie hadn't spoken to me since the Christmas text. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. I didn't call her either. But I knew they'd feel the freeze soon. And they did. A week later, Ken showed up at my door. It was a Saturday morning. I was sipping tea by the window, feeding crackers to the birds on the sill, when I heard the knock. He didn't smile this time. Hi, Thelma. Can we talk? I stepped outside. Didn't invite him in. He looked nervous. Almost humbled. We're having a little trouble accessing some funds. I think it might be something to do with the shared authorization. Maybe something got mixed up? He was playing nice. I played kinder. I fixed it, I said. I removed my name. Froze the account. I thought it was better if you handled your own business. Don't take it the wrong way. His face changed. You can't just do that. I smiled. I can. And I did. Then I gently closed the door. Behind it, my hands trembled. Not out of fear, but power. They thought I was done. But I was just beginning to remind them who I was. If this moment gave you chills like the video, if you've ever had to remind someone of your worth, comment, never underestimate grandma. And don't forget to share this story, because someone out there needs the courage to stop being used in silence. After Ken left my doorstep, he must have called Natalie immediately, because by evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. Then came a text. Really, Mom? You're freezing accounts now? You're making this difficult for everyone. Just let us fix it without all the drama. No apology. No regret. Just blame. They still didn't understand. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being deliberate. For days after, I went about my routines. Tea in the morning, short walks around the park, reading at the library. But I also made one more stop, my lawyer's office. Her name was Marcia. She'd handled my will for years. I sat across from her and slid a manila envelope over the desk. I want to make some changes. She reviewed the documents, the previous version of the will, where everything was to be divided evenly between Natalie and the grandkids. I shook my head. Take them off. I want it all to go somewhere else. Where? She asked. I opened my handbag and pulled out a folder. It was full of photos. Kids from the food pantry, the senior center, the homeless shelter I had visited after Christmas. Real people, real gratitude, the community center, and the literacy fund. And I want something left for Mr. Harold. He never had children, but he always makes sure the sidewalk is clear when it snows. Marcia smiled, but her eyes softened. You sure about this? I nodded. They had a choice. They chose status. I'll choose kindness. It felt like shedding a heavy coat, like releasing a burden I didn't know I had carried for so long. For the first time in years, I felt light. But not everyone was so peaceful. 3 days later, I heard tires screech outside my building. Ken again. This time he wasn't calm. He didn't knock. He pounded. You ruined everything, he growled when I opened the door. You think you're clever? You're just bitter. I stared at him, his reddened face, his clenched jaw. You embarrassed Natalie. She's been crying for days. I raised an eyebrow. Was it before or after she called me a burden? Or was it before she told me I embarrassed the family on Christmas? He had no words, only rage. You'll regret this. That was his parting sentence. But he was wrong, because what I regretted was not standing up for myself sooner. If you've ever stayed silent just to keep peace, only to lose your own, like this video, comment, respect is earned, not owed, if you believe dignity has no age limit. And share this story with someone who needs to hear that setting boundaries is a sign of strength, not bitterness. The threats didn't shake me. They just confirmed everything I already knew. Natalie and Ken had built their comfort on the assumption that I would never push back, that I would stay quiet, stay grateful, stay in my place. But I had spent too many years putting myself last. That was over now. The community center director called me 2 days later. Miss Thelma, I don't know what to say. Your donation is generous, doesn't even begin to cover it. I smiled. Just promise me those kids will get warm meals and good books. That's all I want. We ended the call, and I sat in the stillness of my small apartment. No ticking clock, just the sound of the rain outside, and it felt peaceful. Then the knock came, but it wasn't Ken this time. It was Natalie. I opened the door, unsure of what I'd see. Her eyes were puffy. Her coat was too thin for the weather. Her shoulders slumped like a child who had lost something but didn't know how to ask for it back. Mom, can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like every step took effort. She sat on the edge of my couch and didn't say anything at first. Finally, she whispered, "Why did you do this?" I sat across from her. Why did I give to the shelter? Why did I stop funding your lifestyle? Why did I say nothing when you disinvited me from Christmas? She nodded, eyes welling. I leaned forward. Because you forgot who I was, Natalie. You stopped seeing me as your mother and started treating me like an old receipt, something you already used and didn't need anymore. She looked down. Ken said you'd never cut us off. He said we were just managing you. Managing me. That word stung more than any curse. I'm not an account to manage. I'm a human being. And I deserved better than silence and a text message. Natalie didn't cry loudly, but one tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know what I became. I stayed quiet, let her sit in it. After a moment, she said, "Is it too late?" I looked out the window. I don't know. Trust is like a house. Once it burns down, you don't sleep in the ashes. I didn't say it to punish her. I said it because it was true. And as she sat there, speechless, I realized something powerful. She had come to my door, not because she loved me, but because she had lost what I provided. And I wasn't going to offer it again without something real in return. If you've ever had someone only show up when they needed you, like this story, comment some doors only open once if you believe boundaries protect peace. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that love without respect is manipulation. Natalie sat in my living room for over an hour, mostly in silence. She wanted me to speak first, to reassure her, to fix things like I used to when she scraped her knees or failed a test. But I wasn't that mother anymore. She had grown and so had I. The woman in front of her wasn't just a mother, she was a survivor. And survivors don't rush to comfort the people who caused the storm. I can't undo what I did, Natalie finally said. I listened to Ken. I thought I was doing what was best for our family. I nodded slowly. You chose his comfort over my dignity. You made your decision. But you're still my mom. I smiled faintly, and that used to mean something. Her eyes welled up again. I'm sorry. She meant it, or at least she believed she did. But apologies without accountability are just noise. So I sat still. I don't know what to do next, she whispered. Then maybe sit in the discomfort, I replied. She stood, looked around the room. The same room she once refused to visit. If I try to rebuild this with you, can I? I answered carefully. You can try, but don't come back for money, or comfort, or habit. Come back because you remember who raised you. She nodded. I'll try. I walked her to the door and let her out into the cold. I didn't hug her. I didn't say goodbye, because this time, words weren't enough. She needed to show me with actions. Later that night, I received a message from Ken. It was short. You ruined our lives. I hope you're proud. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out a scrapbook, one I hadn't touched in years. Photos of Natalie as a baby. Drawings she made in first grade. A letter she wrote me at 14 that said, "You're the best mom in the world." I cried quietly, not out of regret, but out of mourning for the girl she used to be, for the woman I had to become to protect myself. And just as I closed the book, the doorbell rang again. This time it wasn't Natalie. It was a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, wearing a staff badge from the community shelter. Miss Thelma, she asked. I nodded. We just wanted to say thank you. Those gifts you donated at Christmas, they made our kids smile for the first time in weeks. She handed me a handmade card, drawn in crayon, signed with dozens of little names. I held it to my chest. That was the family I hadn't birthed, but had chosen me anyway. If this part moved you, don't scroll. Like this video if you believe chosen family can be more loyal than blood. Comment, kindness is never wasted, if you know the power of quiet strength. And share the story. Someone out there needs to hear that walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It was a strange thing, really, how peace returned the moment I stopped trying to earn a place in a house I built. Natalie didn't come back for a while. Ken never did. And I didn't wait for them. Instead, I leaned into the life I still had. I started volunteering at the shelter twice a week, reading to the little ones, serving food with a smile. It reminded me that love is an action, not an obligation. One of the volunteers, a young man named Elijah, asked me one day, Miss Thelma, how do you stay so calm through everything? I looked at him and said, when you've been thrown out of your own family's warmth, you learn how to build your own fire. That evening, I returned home and found a letter on my doorstep. It wasn't from Natalie. It was from her oldest daughter, my granddaughter, Jolie. Dear Grandma, it began. Mom doesn't know I'm writing, but I saw what happened, and I just wanted to say, I still love you. I remember the stories you read me, the pancakes you made shaped like stars. I miss you. I don't care what Mom and Dad say. Can I still visit? I held that letter like it was made of glass. The next weekend, Jolie came by with a small backpack and wide eyes. She hadn't changed, still curious, still kind. We sat for hours. She asked questions. I answered gently. She told me, I don't understand why grown-ups do mean things. I replied, sometimes, baby, grown-ups forget how to be kind when they think love is measured in power, not patience. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough to know that she didn't have to carry the shame of what her parents did. We made a deal. She'd visit every other Saturday. I'd teach her how to make jam. She'd teach me how to use that confusing phone of hers. The bond one thought I'd lost began to bloom again, not through apology, but through action, through a child's choice. Then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, I got a call from my bank. Miss Thelma, we had a strange request this morning. What kind? Someone tried to open a new credit line, using your old documentation, but the name on the application wasn't yours. I paused. Was it Ken? Yes, ma'am. We flagged it immediately. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The past wasn't done trying to chase me. But this time, I wasn't going to run. If you've ever felt peace after choosing yourself, like this video, comment peace over permission if you know that healing sometimes means closing the door for good. And share the story with someone who's still trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I simply thanked the bank manager and hung up the phone. I knew Ken would try something. People like him don't handle being cut off, especially not by someone they once thought was weak. But I wasn't weak. Not anymore. I went straight to the police station with the documentation. I showed them the forged signature, the application form, the history of prior incidents. The officer took one look and said, "Looks like he's got a pattern." I nodded, and I'm done being his pattern. They opened a formal investigation. By the time the case reached court, Ken's name was already on record for financial misconduct, not just against me. Turns out, he had a trail behind him. Natalie didn't show up to support him in court, and that told me everything I needed to know. Sometimes, when people lose control over you, they let go entirely. Not out of guilt, but out of bitterness. And you know what? That's fine, because I had gained something far greater. Freedom. And something else.
Jolie.
Every weekend, like clockwork, she came with a little notebook and a new question. Grandma, why do people hate? Grandma, what's forgiveness? Grandma, why do you always smile, even when you're sad? That one stopped me. I told her, because I choose peace. And I want you to know, even when people hurt you, you can still choose to be soft without being a doormat. She nodded, then hugged me tighter than ever before. That Christmas, for the first time in years, I didn't wait for an invitation. I hosted.
Just a small dinner.
Nothing grand. Jolie helped me cook. A few volunteers from the shelter brought their kids. Mr. Harold came with sweet potato pie. The house rang with laughter, clinking glasses, and joy. As I looked around the table, I realized something deeply powerful. Family isn't about DNA. It's about presence. It's about who stays when there's nothing left to give. I didn't have to burn bridges. They simply rotted on their own from neglect. And I didn't have to scream to be heard. I just had to stop whispering to people who chose not to listen. So, when the new year came, I took a walk down the block. The air was cold, but crisp with promise. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't carry sadness like a second coat. I carried only the warmth of knowing that I lived loudly. And legally. And loved not by all, but by the ones who mattered most. 3 weeks into the new year, something unexpected arrived in my mailbox. A wedding invitation. Not Jolie's, she was still young. This was from Natalie's youngest sister, Claire, my late husband's niece. We hadn't spoken much in years, not because of any bad blood, just life and distance. But the note attached to the invitation stunned me. Aunt Thelma, you're the reason I believe in family. Please come. I want you seated right in front, because you deserve to be seen. I clutched the paper to my chest. It wasn't just an invitation to a wedding. It felt like a validation that I hadn't gone invisible, that someone still saw the woman I was and the strength I held. The wedding was in a small town chapel 2 hours away. I found a lavender dress tucked at the back of my closet, ironed it, and pinned a brooch to my chest. I hadn't worn makeup in years, but that day, I put on a little color. When I walked into that chapel, heads turned, not in pity, not in judgment, but in quiet respect. Claire ran to me with open arms. You look radiant, she whispered. You always have. I was seated right at the front, beside her father, my late husband's brother, who reached over and squeezed my hand. She would have been proud of how you held your ground, he said. I knew who he meant. My late husband, Robert. A man who taught me that dignity doesn't come from status, but from how you treat people when no one's watching. The ceremony was beautiful, but the moment that stayed with me happened during the reception. Jolie pulled me to the side and said, Grandma, I want to tell you something. I leaned in. She looked nervous, twisting her little fingers. Mom told me she doesn't know how to fix things, but she's trying to understand. That was progress. Not an apology, not a fix, but a shift. She also said you're stronger than she ever knew, Jolie added. I smiled. Well, sometimes we have to lose something to realize how precious it was. And just as I said that, the music changed to an old Louis Armstrong song, one that Robert and I used to dance to in the kitchen when Natalie was just a toddler. I stood up. Jolie raised an eyebrow. Are you going to dance? I grinned. I'm not dead yet, child. And so I did. I danced. Not with a partner. Just with the music and the memories. And as I turned gently in place, I noticed Natalie standing far across the room, holding a drink, eyes fixed on me. Not with contempt this time, but with something closer to regret.
Or awe.
Maybe both. And that night, as I rode home in the back seat of a friend's car, looking at the dark trees flicking past the window, I realized something. I never needed anyone to crown me valuable. I'd been royalty all along. They just didn't recognize the throne. If you've ever had to rebuild your confidence after being broken down, like this video, comment, I see my worth now if you've ever danced again after heartbreak. And share this with someone who needs to remember. Dignity doesn't need an invitation. It shows up, shining, all on its own. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than usual, and little green buds pushed through the soil outside my window. Nature always finds a way to heal, even when buried deep. I was sitting on my porch swing one morning, sipping tea, when Jolie came running up the path with something in her hands. Grandma, you got a letter. She handed me an envelope, shaky and slightly crumpled. My name was written in Natalie's handwriting. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to open it. Too many old wounds. But I had learned something over the past year. Closure isn't something people give you. It's something you choose for yourself. I opened it. Inside was a simple, handwritten note.
Mom.
I've been doing therapy. I see now how far I let things go, and how much I let Ken shape my decisions. I hurt you.
Deeply.
I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope, one day, you'll allow me to try to earn back your trust. Love. Natalie. I read it twice. Then I folded it and tucked it inside my Bible, not because I was ready to respond, but because I didn't want to throw it away. Maybe one day. Later that week, I hosted a little get-together at the community center. Not for a birthday.
Not for a holiday.
Just because. People showed up, volunteers from the shelter, some church folks, even the postman. We ate. We laughed. We danced to old Motown songs. And in the middle of it all, Jolie stood and said, I want to thank my grandma for teaching me something. The room got quiet. She taught me that you don't stop being family just because someone breaks your heart. But you also don't stay where you're unloved. You love yourself enough to leave and build something better. There was clapping, a few tears, and I just smiled because I knew that moment wasn't about me anymore. It was about legacy. I had spent most of my life pouring into others. Now I could see the ripple. I didn't get the perfect daughter. I didn't get the fairy tale ending. But I got something better.
Peace.
A home full of laughter, not guilt. Friends who showed up not out of duty but because they cared. And a granddaughter who watched me rise when others wanted me gone. As I sat alone that night, lights off, windows open, I thought about that text, the one that started it all. Don't come for Christmas. You embarrass us. They wanted to erase me, but all they did was remind me who I truly was. I gave away their gifts and got something far more valuable in return. My voice, my power, my life. And I will never give it up again. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to start over, like this video, comment her silence was strength if you've ever chosen peace over approval. And share this story. Someone out there is still sitting quietly, waiting to be seen. Remind them they already are.